Okay, well, good morning, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Brandon Muir. I am the Executive Director of Reclaim New York. Today, we are excited to announce some important milestones in Reclaim's New York Transparency Project, and to do it alongside two great examples of transparency in action, Nassau County Controller George Maragos and Ohio Treasurer Josh Mandel. As many of you know, last fall, Reclaim New York began the unprecedented task of using freedom of information to secure checkbooks from every county, town, village, and school district across the state of New York. We figured it was time that New Yorkers finally saw how their tax dollars are being spent. As a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, this project is emblematic of our belief that you solve systemic corruption and help address the lack of confidence in government by bringing the two sides together: governance through proactive transparency and citizen-driven oversight from the grassroots. This morning, Reclaim New York is launching New York's first online searchable database of local government spending. And again, this is from every town, village, school district, and county across the state. Now, every taxpayer on Long Island can go to reclaimnewyork.org and search the 2014 fiscal year checkbooks from their local government entity. Through Reclaim's new transparency database, dads, moms, journalists, retirees, and business owners can see how their tax dollars are being spent. We will be adding additional data over the next coming months, including Hudson Valley and Central New York. But transparency and increased oversight must be a sustainable effort. To ensure what we're starting here today continues in perpetuity, citizens will be taken, recruited, and coached on how to use the Freedom of Information Law themselves. We're calling these people citizen owners and coaching them to understand that it is their duty to ensure that government remains transparent. Thus, the request for 2015 checkbooks and subsequent years will come from that army. That is the definition of citizen-driven oversight. But Reclaim New York's Transparency Project does more than just citizen-driven oversight. We're also encouraging every government official to take proactive transparency as a real priority. So today, we're also announcing our Local Government Transparency Roadmap, a cooperative effort with entities across the state to bring government and citizens closer together. We will be sending a comprehensive list of guidelines, such as what you see here, to entities all across the state, to their records access officers, and to public officials to reach out and work with them. This list includes indicators like posting online the current checkbook, budgets for the last 3 years, public meeting agendas after the meetings close, before the meetings close, and the minutes after they've been approved. Fortunately, in conducting the most exhaustive and extensive assessment of transparency on Long Island, we were lucky enough to find one public official and one entity that is 2 steps ahead of us. Nassau County Controller George Maragos understands exactly what it means to embrace proactive transparency. George appreciates, as we do, that every penny doesn't belong to government. It belongs online so it can be viewed by citizens transparently. And that's exactly what you find if you come to the Controller's website. Every penny spent is there. You'll also find a wide range of other data that is shared with public for consumption. This makes the Controller's Office an industry leader across Long Island and New York. Of 253 government entities that had the opportunity to post their information, only one did. In releasing our transparency roadmap, Reclaim New York is committed to helping the thousands of government entities across the state, and by doing so, fostering a closer relationship between the taxpayer and their government. Again, George is an example of going above and beyond what compliance requires, and that's truly what it means to embrace proactive transparency. George, thank you kindly for your commitment and for hosting us here today. Please.
Brandon, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Good morning. I would like to welcome Brandon Muir of Reclaim New York and the Ohio Treasurer, Josh Mandel, to Nassau County. I'm delighted to join with both of you in leading by example to make government at every level more transparent and more responsive to residents. Residents and the press have a right to get any and all information they inquire in a manner that is readily, online, and friendly to use through electronic means. Governments have a legal and a moral obligation to be transparent in conducting the people's business. The initiative by Reclaim New York to establish transparency standards and database tools for public spending will make governments more open and accessible and will be a breakthrough in helping to begin the process of restoring trust in government. Governments will be able to more easily post their spending information, and the public will be able to have better access to this information. Governments that don't participate will have to explain to their voters. We are honored to be recognized by Reclaim New York as leaders in this important endeavor by making available online all Nassau County contracts and claims, all payments. And we've been doing this now for, I believe, a little over 2 years. The Nassau County Controller's Office will continue to lead in this regard as a model for other municipalities to follow by being the first now to adopt the standards and tools recommended by Reclaim New York. Thank you.
Perfect.
Josh, would you like to make some remarks as well?
Let me introduce Josh, and then we'll do that. George, again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So as George mentioned, we are also honored to have a national leader in the government transparency movement with us here today in Ohio Treasurer Josh Mandel. Josh's efforts in the Buckeye State have ruffled feathers, turned heads, and been disruptive to the status quo there. By putting every state expenditure online, he has supplied a level of transparency that has stoked citizen demand. His work has inspired activities in other states, certainly our own project here in New York. Josh has made it his mission to ensure that every citizen has access to spending information that previously was virtually impossible to find across the state. In doing so, Ohio has gone from 46th in the nation to first in state transparency. Leveraging the power of the web, Josh has created the most complete, user-friendly, and searchable database for spending in Ohio. That exciting and successful platform was a model for what we're doing here today. And with more than 90% of New Yorkers believing that our state has a serious government corruption problem and having our people suffer from an affordability crisis, we believe more New Yorkers than ever are ready to embrace this new approach to transparency. We have very much appreciated Josh's counsel and assistance up until this point and look forward to continue our partnership with him into the future. So with that, Josh Mandel.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
Thank you all for having me here today, and to Brandon and Reclaim. It's an honor to be here. And George, thanks for opening up your office.
Thank you.
We've been in discussions and working with Reclaim now for probably about 1.5 years. And I'm proud to stand here for multiple reasons, but one of those reasons is that I believe Reclaim has become a national leader when it comes to this government transparency movement. Something that Brandon recognizes and is walking the walk is that this information belongs to the people, not to the government. Even after people pay their taxes, that money still belongs to the citizens. It belongs to the taxpayers. Folks like George, myself, we're simply the stewards. And so what I think Reclaim is doing today by putting these 200 plus entities online, but also empowering citizens through the Freedom of Information laws and in other means, is really creating an army of citizen watchdogs. You know, he talked about the phrase citizen owner. That's really what it's all about. It's about creating this army of citizen watchdogs who have the power to hold politicians accountable. This is a process, and what the process is transferring power. What we're doing here today, Brandon, George, Reclaim, we're transferring power from the politicians to the people. This whole concept is not a new concept. It's one that's steeped in American history. Thomas Jefferson was talking about using information and empowering the people with that information to advance the cause of democracy. James Madison was talking about the concept that when we make government small, we can make the individuals big. And so this concept that Reclaim is embracing and advancing today isn't a new concept. It's been around for a couple hundred years in this country. What they're doing is leveraging modern day technology. They're at the tip of the spear with modern day technology and putting this information on someone's iPhone in their pocket, putting this information in their computer at their desk at the office or in their kitchen, so that from the comfort of their own home or the comfort of their office or from their iPhone walking around the county here, they can see how the money's being spent and hold the politicians accountable. When you look throughout America, whether it's here or my state or anywhere in this country, there's a high level of cynicism when folks look at how government and the democratic process works. And also, I think there's a lack of faith in the public servants. And I think a lot of that lack of faith has been, quote unquote, earned by these politicians. It's not for no reason that the citizens have lost confidence in politicians on both sides of the aisle. And I believe one of the main antidotes to that lack of faith is this: is taking the information, all the spending decisions politicians make, all the spending information that's in buildings like this throughout this state, throughout America, putting it online for everyone to see. And so the decision that politicians have throughout the county and state here is very simple. Do they want to be Blockbuster Video? Or do they want to be Netflix? Throughout this county, if I heard right, there's 253 and there's only one in George that have signed up. And so the question I have for those other 252 local government leaders is this: you guys want to be taxi cabs? Or do you want to be Uber? Because technology is changing at such a rapid pace that today this might be seen as something that's need and almost a luxury to have. But mark my words, 2-3 years from now, citizens are going to be demanding this. And they're going to look back on this day, they're going to look back at what Brandon and Reclaim are doing, they're going to look back on what George is doing, and they're going to see them as pioneers. And so I think what Reclaim is doing by taking the mantle of transparency and really leading on it is contributing to a statewide movement, but really a national movement. Because mark my words, there's going to be folks throughout this state and throughout this country that read about what Reclaim is doing today. And in places throughout the country, they're going to say, well, why can't we do that in our own state? And that's one of the things that's been so exciting about the partnership between Reclaim and our office, is that together we're trying to move the ball down the field in this transparency movement for Ohio, for my state, for New York, for their state, but also for the entire country. And you watch. Folks are going to take the lead of what Reclaim is doing here today, what George is doing here today, and they're going to try to advance that cause in other parts of the country as well. Brandon mentioned that Reclaim is a nonpartisan, non-political, nonprofit organization. One of the beauties of this transparency movement is that it brings people together across the political spectrum. George, I have no idea what political party you are, and it doesn't really matter. As we've done this in Ohio, we've had folks on the far right and far left standing there with us. There's a group called the Buckeye Institute, which is a conservative think tank in Ohio, standing there with us. And there's a group called Common Cause. You guys probably have some Common Cause groups here in New York, which is a left-leaning think tank, standing at the same podium. The Ohio Newspaper Association. Folks across that political spectrum standing together for this cause of transparency. And so when you look in Washington, D.C., when you look in Columbus, Ohio, when you look in Albany, New York, you see all this bickering and infighting. All these politicians fighting about everything. And the nice thing about this transparency movement, this issue of transparency, is that it's completely nonpartisan. And I think what you're going to see through Brandon's leadership is Reclaim bringing together people across that political spectrum for the cause of empowering taxpayers to hold politicians accountable. And I'm proud to stand here with George, with Brandon, with Reclaim to advance this cause. Let me just finish up by making one other observation about the work that Reclaim is doing. I think Reclaim is thinking outside the box when it comes to technology and how to make politicians think twice before they go to a conference in Hawaii, when maybe they could have gone to a conference in Rochester. Make them think twice before they stay at the Ritz-Carlton on taxpayer dime, when they could have stayed at the Holiday Inn down the street. And I think because Reclaim is using this cutting-edge technology, it's going to be a behavior change. The whole point here isn't transparency. The point is changing behavior among politicians, making them think twice before they waste taxpayer money, or even worse, defraud the citizens. So I'm proud to stand here. I'm honored that you invited me to be included in this press conference, and I look forward to continuing to partner with Reclaim, George, and others to get those other 252 entities online in short order. Thank you very much.
Great. Sorry. Thank you. So as Josh mentioned, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit, and the idea behind transparency is that everything gets put out in the open so people can make a decision for themselves. This isn't about left or right, Republican or Democrat. It's about, as Josh said, creating the right environment for public officials to act appropriately and responsibly because they know that citizens demand it, that it's the right thing to do. Unfortunately, there are times when that doesn't happen, and it's important to mention today a fourth component of this project is to use litigation to ensure that the days of ignoring FOIA requests or deciding that you're not going to approve the access to a public record because no one's watching, those days have ended. To protect taxpayers, Reclaim New York filed an Article 78 several months ago against several entities that are nearby. The town of Oyster Bay and the Manhasset Public School District took repeated and deliberate effort to block our FOIA request or deny us. Last week, the state Supreme Court in Nassau County rendered its judgment on that. The court said that they would force both entities to pay our legal fees because the governments had either, and I quote, no reasonable basis for denying access to their spending data or to outright fail to respond. And that's a pretty stark statement. It shouldn't require New Yorkers to file a lawsuit, to spend thousands of dollars to see how their tax-paying dollars are being spent. It doesn't make sense. All taxpayer-funded entities and public officials need to know that this will no longer be tolerated. And as we continue to grow our citizen army, it's not just going to be Reclaim New York standing there saying enough is enough. It will be local citizens, it will be neighbors who are finally empowered to use our platform to demand transparency. Through Reclaim New York and our Transparency Project, we want to remind all elected officials and all public officials that transparency is not a hope, it is not an idea. Transparency is the law. So with that, thank you all, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.